Welcome to probably what is our last on the playground for this year, and could be that we revamp the whole thing, and this is our last on the playground ever. But it took me a long time to get these two gentlemen and their schedules aligned. So here we are. I'll say a couple of things later about me, but I want Renee Thornton Jr. and Dr. David Sterling Brown to introduce themselves. Let's start with Renee, and let me prompt you, Renee. I would love for you to give our audience a brief thumbnail bio of you that includes something about your various encounters with Othello, ending with your current gig that you are doing and current projects going on. But tell us a little bit about you and what got you to Othello's.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Renee Thornton Jr. My first encounter with Othello performing, I think we read it in like the 11th grade, but my first encounter performing it was when I was in grad school in a production directed by Paul Barnes. Did
you like it in high school when you read it?
I did. Yes, I was going to say a thing, but that will come up later, and so we'll circle back around to that. But I didn't at the first time when we read it in English class. It becomes about the English class of it all, and so I didn't fall in love with the play immediately, but also I didn't fall in love with a lot of the things that we read in English class. So,
but that was also in high school, and
yes.
I don't think a lot of folks get to experience it in high school. So that's interesting that you did.
Yeah. Our AP prep teacher liked to push his students beyond typical high school fare. Then I played the role in grad school in 1999. And then I played it the first time at the AFC in 2006 with James and Sarah, who are also here, and you, Mr. Warren, of course. And then I did it again in 2010, again with Sarah and Jim and a few other people. And I also I forgot my half because I've really done it 3.5 times because I understudied it at Utah Shakespeare Festival in 2002. Yes. So that's my half. And so that's my experience with Othello. The sort of greater umbrella of it all is that I've mostly spent my career doing Shakespeare. I was at the American Shakespeare Center for 13.5 years. I have been very fortunate to have performed professionally in all of the plays in Shakespeare's folio. I have been working regional theater circuit for the last 5-ish years. And for the last, since September of last year, I am currently on tour with the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. I'm doing the national tour of that, which we just started year 2 back in September. And I'm not sure what's been announced yet, so I'll just say I'll be doing that until fall of next year.
Gotcha.
So very different life I'm living than from my days of all Shakespeare all the time. That's for sure. But the magic is the magic matters, and the ability to change clothes quickly also matters. So these are the things that are the same for sure.
Nice. Yeah. David, would you introduce yourself to our audience and a little bit of your bio and your encounters with Othello and leading up to your scholarly projects that have involved Othello, but also just your current projects that might not have anything to do with that play?
Sure. That's a lot.
Yes.
I'm David Sterling Brown. I'm Associate Professor of English at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, also a Connecticut native. And interesting intersections in terms of Othello's interest in my life and my interest in the play as well. But I'll say for now that I am on the board of trustees for the American Globe Center, or actually American Shakespeare Center, I should say. And so there's some overlap there with Renee and also Jim. And in terms of thinking about Othello, I do Shakespeare and critical race studies as a scholar. And so Othello came into my life, I guess, through that. I mean, I read it in maybe high school. Wasn't a play that I gravitated towards. And I won't say too much more about that because I know Jim has some questions for us about how I teach it and think about it. But I did work with Keith Hamilton Cobb on his Untitled Othello project for 2 to 3 years. And we had a residency at Sacred Heart University. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this play like never before, because it's actually I'd say up until around the time of working with Keith Hamilton Cobb, Othello was at the bottom of my list of plays that I actually liked. So that has changed. So I can talk some more about that too. But the other thing I'll say is I'm the author of Shakespeare's White Others. And so I have a chapter in here on Othello. Jim's got it too. I appreciate you, Jim. And so I have a chapter, and I think also, between working with Keith Hamilton Cobb, writing the chapter for my book, that all sort of helped me reconsider my sort of loathing of this play, if you will. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, right, it is just a play that is, ripe with anti-Black racism. And so that's hard for somebody who is a Black man who can identify with Othello. But I got over that. And then the other thing I would say in terms of other projects, I have a piece on Othello coming out in an edited collection called Shakespeare in the Shape of Words that'll be published by Cambridge University Press, I think, next year. And in that play, I'm using the term, or in that chapter, rather, I'm using the term domestic to think about what is happening in this play, because some scholars have argued that Shakespeare is a domestic tragedy, thinking of like Emma Whipday, for instance. And I actually do agree with that reading of the play. So that's one thing. And then I also have a chapter on the English discipline that will be published in a volume called American Anti-Blackness. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Could you tell? I'm imagining that there are some folks on the call who don't know about the Untitled Othello project. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yes. So the Untitled Othello project started by Keith Hamilton Cobb. I joined them as dramaturg, and basically we, and by we I mean Keith, Jessica Burr, who was the artistic director for the Untitled Othello project, and Keith was obviously in the director role, and a group of us and actors. We were all just sitting around with the script, basically thinking about how we can just look at it as an object, and also how we can think about slowing down the process when it comes to putting on a production or performance of a Shakespeare play. So many times these things happen rather quickly when we think about Broadway, for instance. And so Keith Hamilton Cobb was very interested in slowing that down. And part of the untitling process is to kind of strip the play of what we sort of know of it and what our sort of preconceived ideas are, or what we've been taught about it, and just come into it and walk through it. And so we spent a lot of time just looking at the text, playing out some of the scenes. Not me, I'm not an actor, but playing out, I was the dramaturg for them, as I mentioned, but and really trying to figure out, what's happening in that play and how can we present it differently to an audience so that we can do something that hasn't been done before on a stage. And it hasn't been platformed yet, but it's still something that's in progress. I believe most recently, Keith and the team did a stint at the Shakespeare Association of America conference and did a workshop where they taught people the process of untitling, and again, allowed people to see some of the actors doing their thing. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Renee, I'm going to throw this question to you first.
Okay.
Well, and this is actually more for you. I'm going to twist it for David in a second. And this is like one of perhaps your nightmare questions, because you played this role several times a long time ago.
Yes.
And I'm interested in what comes to your mind when you think of the most challenging aspects of playing that character in the productions that you were in. And at least jumping around as a starting point to, because we're going to talk a lot about Othello on stage and Othello as a play from a scholarly point of view that isn't necessarily pointed at the stage. So trying to milk your stage experience with it, what do you recall as being, damn, that was hard?
Well, I mean, the first time I did it, it was like my first kind of big juicy role in grad school, sort of. And so like that was challenging. Like I was stressed, just sort of like what was being asked of me was more than had been asked of me, I think, in my career up to that point. Um, I, you know, I've never had to do the show 8 times a week. And I'm glad of that because I don't know how you would do that. I remember years ago someone saying some piece of theater lore that someone asked Gielgud, like, how do you do eight times a week? And he said, you don't, never more than 4. I was like, well, there you go. So, you know, with a lot of those big, heavy Shakespeare roles, Othello, Lear, et cetera, it takes a lot out of you, you know, to go to the places that you have to go to for those shows. And so, there is a sort of catharsis for you as an actor too in your death. I've always found like I like when the character sort of gets to die on stage because that's the catharsis for me. Like that's when I get to release and I don't have to carry all that stuff back home with me. But you know, I think when I think of challenges, what I mostly remember is the 2010 production that we did, and having done it so recently with the same director and the same Desdemona, and like how to grow in that, how to take feedback that I had received from the previous production and incorporate that into this new production. You know, a lot of, you know, actors are always like, I don't read reviews. And like, I wouldn't read reviews except for the fact that for over a decade, I lived in a small town where people would come up to you in the grocery store and give you a play-by-play breakdown of everything they thought about the play they just saw. So you were getting people's reviews on the regular. And so, you know, that I had all of that in my head. And so I remember when we started, I was trying to sort of play against a lot of the stuff that I had done in the 2006 production. And I remember you, Jim, at a rehearsal being like, what are you doing? And you asked me, you were like, did someone say something to you? Or are you trying to like not do a thing? And I was like, yeah, I am. And you were like, don't do that. And I was like, okay, I won't do that. And it got better from there. So
and that was a challenge, and I would imagine that a different flavor for Shakespeare's company when his actors were not doing the longer runs, even though we were in repertory at the Blackfriars. Still, it's not quite the same as Shakespeare's company when they would do something for you know, a couple of times, do a play, and then come back to it a month later.
right.
It's quite the same thing.
Yeah.
I remember specifically saying, hey, we can steal from ourselves. We should not change a moment just to be different. We should change the moment when we feel like it has something different to say with these people in this setting. And picking up on that, same Desdemona, 2 different Iagos. Did you find your journey different the second time around because of the different people around you? We've got the guy that played Iago with you the first time, and we got the who played Desdemona with you both times. I'm curious how similar and different it felt 4 years later.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was both similar and different. You know, we did so many shows at the ASC. For those of you watching, in any given year, I did between 9 and 11 plays at the ASC. So between 2006 and 2010, I'd probably done 30 plays. And so, like, I was a different actor who had then gone through 30 more plays. Shakespeare taught me to be a better actor, and so continually working on his plays continually made me better. And so that, I think, was different. I think that James Keegan, who played Iago in 2006, and Benjamin Kearns, who played it in 2010, are different actors. So of course that has an effect on what you're doing. James and I there's a little bit of an age difference. He's a little older than me. And so that nature of that relationship, I am my mother's son. And so I was raised with slight deference to those who are older than you. And so I think consciously or subconsciously, that's the word, that I think played into the partnership in a way that when I did it with Benjamin, I'm a little bit older than him. But we're a little bit closer in age. And so it felt a little bit more like we were on the same level, instead of Iago being Othello's sort of wise advisor. With Benjamin, Iago became more my partner, that we were a little bit more in the same place.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw some things to Jason and Sarah, to James and Sarah, in a little bit. But let me turn that question to David. What was your experience like when you were first teaching Othello in the classroom? Did that happen quickly? Did that happen later? How far into your teaching career were you before you tackled that play?
That's a great question. So I think I want to say 7 years in, I avoided it. My go-to when I was thinking about plays where I could discuss interracial dynamics, Titus Andronicus, Shakespeare's first tragedy that features his first Black character, Othello. And a lot of that was personal, some of it critical, but just, when I read Titus, and that was the play that really got me as an undergrad into Shakespeare. I'm pretty sure we read Othello in my Shakespeare class, but I don't remember. And so I think that says something too, just how much Titus stuck with me. But I started teaching it when I came to Trinity in 2022, and the process was slow. I wasn't sure I wanted to put it in my syllabus, but I know that a lot of students like the play. And so for me, it was really a test for myself as a pedagogue, because I feel like I can teach anything, but can I teach this play, and how can I teach this play? But also to find out what could I learn from the students about why this play is still important to teach and still important to stage, because some people, think it's not. I know, Jim, you have questions for us later that are sort of pertaining to that subject. But when I got the play into the classroom and saw what my students were able to do with it, that honestly blew my mind. And I have taught it every year since, if not every semester. And part of that has to do with the way I'm in my pedagogical practice. I am constantly trying to bridge the past and the present. So as much as I want to think about Shakespeare's day and what was happening in his time, and why he might create a character like Othello or Aaron the Moor from Titus, for instance, I also want to think about how we can use these plays as vehicles to understand our world, because I do find the contemporary resonances to be uncanny sometimes. And for students, I'll give you one example of something that blew my mind, because I hadn't thought about the play in this way because I hadn't thought about it. But when I was teaching my students Othello, I remember a moment of sort of contemporary discourse, and this was obviously post 2020. So, we're past America's quote unquote racial reckoning moment and everything. And the students, one student in particular, I remember, raised the issue of how Othello and his desire to sort of be a full participant in society sort of reminded him of how, you know, we think about Black NFL football players, for instance, and the issues around taking, you know, sort of protesting, right? Taking a knee when the Pledge of Allegiance or Star Spangled Banner is being sung, right? It was kind of the same thing for these students, where it's like, you can be the general, you can, we can use your body. We're okay with you doing that. But as far as becoming a sort of patriarchal influence or connected to that by marrying this white woman in the play, and being a full participant in Venetian society, right? It seems like for these students, there was a parallel there in terms of how people respond to these NFL players. But also, even I remember, now you've got me going back into this class. I remember Obama came up as well, right? And thinking about Iago's resistance to Othello's decision at the beginning of the play, right? Which is he's upset because Cassio has been given this role and not him. And it begs the question of, right, respecting Othello's authority as a Black man, which we saw Obama deal with challenges around his authority, et cetera. And so I just found those moments, and of course we can go deeper into the play, but those moments with my students made me think. And I believe that was around the time I was working on my book too. So Othello was in my mind because of Untitled Othello Project, because of me bringing it into my classroom and seeing what the students could do, but then also me challenging myself to write the chapter in my book and try to look at the play differently. So that's sort of how I came to position Othello as part of my pedagogical practice. And, you know, I taught it earlier this semester, and I'll probably teach it again next semester.
I'm gonna want to get back to the difference between when you first taught it and what you just taught in a second. But you bring up an interesting point. I want us to be able to talk about some things tonight that might be uncomfortable. You know, that anything to do with race can sometimes be uncomfortable, and some people feel they have a lot of feelings about you know, where their race is and how they view race versus how somebody else views race. And certainly we can have different opinions on what Shakespeare does in this particular play. But something that a lot of folks, and I don't want to put either of you in the position of speaking for more folks than just yourselves, but Black scholar, Black actor, Othello, the play about the Black guy. I'm wondering if it was a thing, a weight, you know, well, you're a Black man actor, so of course you're going to play Othello, right? You're a Black Shakespeare professor. You're going to teach Othello, of course, aren't you? Was there stuff in your fields that you thought, I can't get away from this play, whether I like it or don't like it? That there is, was there ever any kind of inevitability bullshit attached to that play for you? Or was it just, it's a play and it's about what it's about?
Do you want to take
Go ahead,
that?
David. No, go ahead.
So that's a great question. I felt absolutely zero pressure to include this play or exclude it. And there have been debates about, again, whether or not it's a play that should be, you know, retired. How useful is it to stage it? And I think it can be particularly generative if it's staged right, if you can move the audience in the right way to really understand what is happening. And I don't know, you know, as I like my book chapter, for example, even though this is the play with the titular character who is a Black man, my chapter focuses on whiteness. So I'm not interested in Othello. I'm interested in what happens to him and why what happens to him happens. And a lot of it has to do with how he is treated by the characters around him. And these characters are white. So there's that. Now, in terms of thinking about me as a Black scholar, no, also to again, sort of no pressure there as far as including it, simply because, you know, when I'm teaching, I'm really interested in both making myself uncomfortable. So I'm glad you actually said that, Jim, because my teaching methodology is called productive discomfort. And I'm really interested not in, so actually funny too, I'll back up. I went to a conference for the New England Association of Teachers of English like 3 weeks ago, and it was called Brave Spaces, Safe Spaces. And my whole presentation was rooted in the fact that I don't believe there are such things as safe spaces, because the question becomes safe for whom? And, you know, in the piece that I wrote called Discomfort is the Point, and it's about what I'm talking about right now, I actually bring in Othello as an example. And I talk about how it is incredibly uncomfortable. I teach at a predominantly white institution, right? And so it's a hard play already on its own, but then you put me in front of the classroom, I'm a Black man, and I can't run away from my position as a person in this world or as a teacher. I have to run toward it, right? And I think the students do as well. And so the discomfort that arises, if you know how to work it and if you know how to use it to your advantage, it's actually great content for making sure students learn. Because when you attach things to people's emotions, and I think these plays all the time, they're playing on our emotions, especially when we can see them stage. People remember things because you touch them and they learn. And I think this play does that. I didn't believe this until about 3 years ago. I think this play does that really well, and not just for Black people. I think it should do that for everyone, because I remember when I was in the rehearsal room with the Untitled Othello project, one question that I raised for the actors, everyone in the room, because that question comes up all the time for the person who's sort of starring as Othello, like, how hard is this for you to be in this play where these racist insults from start to finish are being hurled at you? But I flipped that on its head and asked the actors in the room, everybody, how hard is it to be that committed to racism, right? And to have to play that role and to embody that and do that to me should be hard. And if it's not, then that's something to think about too. So that's where I sort of take this with my students.
Yeah.
Gotcha. How about you, Renee?
Yeah, I mean, going back to when you had asked if I liked it when we read it in high school, this came up. That's why, because you know, we would read scenes out loud, and the teacher would be like, "Well, Renee, you read Othello," and like, "Well, yeah," because of course I was going.
Were you the only Black student?
Yes, I was going to high
Yes.
school in Utah. There were not
Right.
very many Black students in my high school. And I'm sure I was the only one in the class. And so even that, you know, I was all of 16 or something. But I didn't like the sort of inevitability of that, even though, like, I was in my sort of early days of wanting to be an actor. And it's obviously a very juicy role. But I wanted to do it on my terms and not someone else's terms. Then when it's interesting too, because then when I got to grad school, I was not the only Black actor in our class. And there was kind of a little bit of a to-do, because everyone kind of just assumed, casting had not been announced. Everyone had assumed that I would be the Othello because of the kind of actor that I am. And the kind of actor that the other Black actor in our class was. But he one day was like, why does everybody just been like, Renee's playing Othello? Like, I could play Othello. How come no one's talking about me playing Othello?
I'm guessing that you are taller than he is. Your voice is deeper, and you played more mature characters than he did.
Yep, all true.
Yes.
Yes, 100%. And you know, and by that point, I had started to fall in love with the play, but to this day, Othello really is one of my favorites. I love it. But I never, ever, ever, when someone asks me about my favorite Shakespeare plays, I never say Othello, because it feels cliche. Like, oh, of course, the Black Shakespearean actor has Othello as his favorite Shakespeare play. Please, I can't. So I never do that, which I apologize to Othello for that, because he deserves better than that for me. But
You've also gotten to crawl inside of every damn big Shakespeare character that you would want to play.
Also true.
Yes.
I do have a lot to choose from. Yes.
David, how is the class that you taught just recently on Othello, when you were teaching it, do you teach it differently now than you did a few years ago when you first started teaching it? Do you teach it differently since you wrote that chapter in your book?
Yes. I mean, again, I was like in the process of finishing the book when I taught the play the first time, but it has evolved slightly, but not much. I mean, because again, so the class that I teach in, it's called Shakespeare's Other Race Plays. And so I teach it only as a sort of tool for the students to start thinking about how race is operating in Shakespeare's plays and how it was. I teach them about how it was in his day, but then I call that the sort of training wheels part of the class. And then we do Titus, Othello, Antony, and Cleopatra, so plays that include interracial dynamics. And then the training wheels come off, and we're looking at Hamlet, Twelfth Night, Much Ado About Nothing, still having conversations about race, right? But thinking about whiteness. And so when it comes to how I teach it in this class, you know, it's an upper division course. And so we typically have secondary readings that they're reading alongside these things, these texts. And so, for instance, I can't remember exactly what I paired with Othello because that was like week 2 of class and we're in week 11 now. But I want to say it was something, you know, that wasn't necessarily prompting the students to think about whiteness because they weren't there yet. That's not something that happens in a lot of English classes or in every single English class. It could, right? Because everybody is gendered, whether we like that or not, and everybody is race. And so right now, you know, I really get the students to do this assignment called the scene isolation, where they have to drop into the play, pick any scene they want, and they have to tell me and figure out for themselves what is happening with race. And it's much easier to do that in a play like Othello, because, right, you can just point to the racism and the interracial dynamics and the tension there. But again, once we get to a play like Twelfth Night or Hamlet even, it gets harder. And so when I'm teaching the play, you know, the students are very much focused on Othello. They're also focused on Iago and Desdemona, the main characters, and figuring out what's happening with them. But I remember when a student who I believe was presenting on the play, and we were having a conversation about it. And one of the things that came up, which is actually something that I'm touching on in my Shakespeare in the Shape of Words chapter that I mentioned, is how, you know, there's something interesting, right, with this Desdemona, Othello, Brabantio dynamic, for instance, when we think about the fact that Desdemona gets married without her father's consent, right? So there's a reason why. There's some reason why. And then we see, for instance, later on, and not too much later, but at the court scene, for instance, that, you know, Brabantio has an issue with this. And his sort of prejudices or racism, however you want to look at it, against Othello, the limits of his liking him, we see that, right? There's a limit to it. And it's this, and so that's what my students were pointing to when they were talking about the NFL. Like, you can be on the field, but when you want to talk about Black lives being important, whoa, like, don't, that's too much. Or you can be president, but don't try to dictate too much, right? Like, you don't know what you're doing. And so all of these moments with these students have actually, and that taught me a lot about the play. And that's what I tell my students: as much as I am here to teach, I'm also here to learn. It's a two-way street. And that's where I'm at with it. I don't know what I'll do with it in the future. I'm teaching a play next semester called Pop Culture Shakespeare. So that could be an interesting angle to see what's out there in the pop culture world. I know there's films and stuff, but I want to go beyond that. Actually, I'll show you this. I have a bag, and Othello takes up quite a bit of space on my bag here. And so, you know, I just want to do with the play. I like to keep my teaching current, and so I move with the times, right? And so who knows what our world is going to look like next year and what the students might see in the play that is reflected, you know, reflective of our world. But that's what I'm doing so far.
Gotcha. Renee, in honor of Christmas Carol's Three Ghosts, we talked a tiny bit about Othello's past,
Yes.
but in thinking about present and future, if you were to approach playing the role today or tomorrow, you were awfully young when you played it for me twice.
Yes.
And that character is written to not be young.
Yeah.
I cut a bunch of references because they just did not apply, and I did not want to graybeard you up and so you've got more life experience, and you talked about that earlier, that even within the 4 years you had grown as an actor. Do you immediately think of anything that, man, when I get to attack that role again, I would do this kind of thing differently. I would approach him differently in this other way. And maybe if you don't have, Jim Warren yelling at you, telling you, his bullshit, maybe that's another thing that you could get away with. Hopefully you will have Jim Warren yelling at you, because he'll be at the American Globe Center. That will work out better.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, I would like to, if anyone out there is watching this and planning on programming Othello in about 2 years, I will be available. Please call me or my agents, HCKR. Thank you very much.
But I'm going to stay at Hogwarts for
the moment. I'll be at Hogwarts. I was thinking about that as I was rereading the play over the last few days in preparation for tonight. I was like, what would be different? Besides the things you mentioned, like I am older now than I was then. Yes, we don't like to talk about these things, but they are true. And so that obviously would occur differently. But in rereading it, I was like, my take on the play hasn't actually altered much, so I would be curious. Obviously you get in a room, the director's going to have their ideas, the Iago's going to have his ideas, the Desdemona's going to have her ideas, the Amelia's going to have her ideas, and between all of us, we're going to get together and work it out. And I'm excited about that. It was funny when I started to read this play the other day, like I know Iago and Rodrigo's lines. I just know this play so well, even though it's been a long time since the last time I read it, that I'm excited to get in the room with this play again that I do know so well. It would be awesome to get in the room again with it, with a bunch of actors that I love and a director that I trust, to see how we could tell this story in the 2020s. It's a weird sentence, but that's where we are.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
This book, as a plug for it, on page 137, it says Iago's mindfuck game is good. Dr. David Sterling Brown, what did you mean by that?
I like that's my favorite chapter. I think that's partly why I came to like this play, because I just had a lot of fun writing this chapter, and swearing. But what do I mean by that? Could I actually may I read a little excerpt of that to put it out there?
I was going to. So the fact that you heard in your voice, yes, please.
Okay. So the title of this section, it's the opening section. I have like a little introduction in this chapter. Chapter 4, it's called Hear Me, See Me, Sex, Violence, Silence, and Othello. And then this section where I get into the part that Jim just mentioned the first line from, it's titled In Bed with Iago, Mind Fucking White Men. And I begin, Iago's mindfuck game is so good. With skill, he performs like the kind of partner who satisfies himself as well as those with whom he engages in what I call his intercourse discourse. The meaning of this section's title is multifaceted. It establishes how a white man, Iago, is a mindfucker. It establishes how white men in this play can be mindfucked. You can think about Brabantio, for instance. It queers and calls attention to Iago's figurative and somewhat violent sexual activity with a few of the play's white men. And it signals how there is a perverse psycho-racial component to the narratives Iago creates around race and sex, narratives that eventually allow him to master Othello and seduce him mentally. And with that, you know, I then go through the chapter just thinking about all these moments, right? Like, you know, there's the animalistic metaphors in the play that are used to incite fear in Brabantio around him having his nephews like neighing to him and things of that nature, as well as making the beast with two backs. All of these sexually charged phrases and moments in the play. And then, of course, Iago's moment where he's relaying to Cassio, I'm sorry, not Cassio, Othello, rather, that he was in bed with Cassio. And Cassio somehow deemed yes, and the tupping your white you. Yeah, thank you for that, Tom. And that Cassio is somehow pretending in his sleep that he's with Desdemona as if this is some kind of disclosure of an affair between, like, so there's so much. And I mean, really what I'm thinking about mind fucking, to put it in terms that most people probably would understand better, is gaslighting. Like, he gaslights the hell out of Othello, and not just Othello, other characters. And that's where we really start to see, I mean, one could say, like, yes, Othello's tragic flaw. I mean, that's, you know, scholars are interested in that discourse. What's his tragic flaw? It's jealousy. Sure. But I think there's other things to think about that are happening there, particularly as it pertains to what is happening to Othello. And speaking of this question you asked about my teaching it now, you know, when I was talking to my students a few weeks ago about this play, one of my students, you know, she mentioned how jealousy just doesn't quite fit with her understanding of what is happening in this play as far as Othello's tragic flaw is concerned, because that jealousy is manufactured by this external source. And so he doesn't get to be in that space on his own. Like, someone actually brings him, I mean, Iago brings him there. This world that he lives in brings him there. So that's the mind fucking, but it's really about, the gaslighting that happens in this play.
I'm interested, Renee, how well do you remember the different flavors of mind fucking that each of you, I mean, because each of your different Iagos, I mean, not only did you have two different mind fuckers, but they fucked you mentally all the way through the damn play. I'm interested in how you hear that phrase and process that from your experience on stage.
It was fucking exhausting.
We just lost our PG-13 rating, I think, this episode.
It's about time. I've been trying to lose that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The thing that came to mind when David was talking was, I can remember so strongly in both iterations, in talkbacks. And people would look at the Iago sitting next to me, whether it was David or Ben, or David, Keegs or Ben. David was my first Iago. And, you know, go on at length about what a great mindfucker he was, and like how it's incredible what Iago does, and the manipulating, and yep, we've all heard it, right? And then, in the same breath, they would look at me and go, "How could you do those things?" I'm like, you just answered this question for yourself. Why are you saying that to me? And there's probably several reasons for why they are saying that to me. But I used to find it so frustrating, because I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, he is how I could do those things, as you just said, which I always found very frustrating. I think, it's interesting to hear David talk about the sort of like sexual undertones, because, you know, that scene with Iago and Othello is often referred to as a seduction scene. And I do feel like, you know, I am also a gay man, so that's also like part of who I am. But I do think that there is a intimacy there between Othello and Iago that is different than the intimacy between Desdemona and Othello. And that I felt like I was able to get that with all three of my Iagos. But they were similar to what I was talking about before about sort of like the age differences and sort of how that played itself out. I think that affected the nature of that intimacy. And it's probably the key differential to it. Yeah.
Because of one of your Iagos is right here in my upper right box.
Right.
James, if we take what most folks think of as Shakespeare's time frame in how he wrote his plays, there's a lot of different people will argue different stuff, but if we accept kind of the normal trajectory that Richard III came earlier, and that guy in front of the audience tells you who he is. We get from him, we get to Don John saying, "I am a villain." We get characters that pronounce their bad guy-ness. I believe that he's on top of his game when he's writing Othello, and he can do anything he wants, however he wants. And he chooses to write this guy, I think, in a more subtle way than Richard III. I'm interested in, I'm assuming that you did not think I am the bad guy, and I am going to play the bad guy. I'm interested in how you wrapped yourself around the mind fucking, because you may well have thought I will mind fuck him, rather than that being a byproduct of something else. But I'm interested in trying to get into your brain in playing Iago and how it relates to this idea of Iago's mind fuck game is so good.
Do you have any complex questions or?
The answer is yes.
I mean, you speak to something that I think most actors would say that they have to find something about the character to love or to like or to understand, to comprehend. That I do think there are people who take great pleasure in hurting others. That have sadistic, that are also masochistic streaks, I think, very often. And this is an insecure person. It was easier for me, I think, as an older Iago to play the passed over thing and the sexual insecurity excuses that he comes up with. I do think Othello is ripe for attack. And I think it is about jealousy. So I disagree with that view that it's not about jealousy. I think it's it reminds me of in the book of Job. Job says at one point, Job's like, I'm faultless, I never did anything wrong. And then at one point early in the book, he says, I always worried that this would happen. and it's like everywhere else, he's like, I never did anything wrong. I followed you, God. I always worried this would happen. You know what I mean? And I think
but I'm sorry, are you talking about Iago's jealousy or Othello's?
I'm talking about Othello's jealousy. I think that what Iago is close enough to identify is that as strong as this guy is, as much as he's accomplished, and I think it works better with an older Othello. Too, because he's, if he's older, he's a bachelor, he's set in his ways, he's not anticipating Desdemona. She comes kind of out of nowhere and surprises him. So I think it plays better maybe with an older Othello. But I think that, that Othello is on stage, he is fundamentally a kind of outsider. And Brabantio reinforces the truth of that. I've played Brabantio in the 2010 version. So I always thought that Iago was, just, he felt passed over, and he looked at this guy and he says he seems so powerful, he seems so capable, but I see the clay feet under this statue, and I see how it can be manipulated. And then, he's so arrogant, Iago. Like, he flies by the seat of his, as one of my favorite things about the role is how he flies by the seat of his pants. He's making stuff up on the fly. He's Knavery's plain face is never seen till used. 'Tis here, but yet confused. He's like, yeah, I'll figure it out as I go. You know what I mean? So I'm in danger of just like talking forever about this because I love this role so much, and I loved doing it so much with the people I did it with. But I think that I did feel as we were doing it that there is a kind of attraction to Othello at work too. That do not rise, and he makes that pledge to him, and it's performance. He says, what's he then that says, I play the villain? He's very aware of being a performer. But I think there's something about that kind of marriage vow that he makes with Othello that really goes to a very strange, I am your own forever. It's not necessary to go that far. He does, and I think that's a little more about Iago than it is about Othello. I think that he's jealous of Othello too. I think he wants to be what Othello is, and he knows he's not, and that's a reason to bring him down too. So those are some of my thoughts about having played it, and how I sort of learned about him as we went.
I know that I know you well enough. I think I know you well enough that I could press certain play buttons, and I know that you would have a lot to say for a long time, and it would be very interesting. So I'm cautious as I ask this question. As an actor playing somebody who is a mindfucker and is racist and mean, and think of all the negative things that was it hard to crawl inside that guy's brain and that guy's skin and do that flavor of manipulation?
Yes and no. I mean, I grew up in Queens, New York, on an Irish-Italian ghetto, so I knew from racism. You know what I mean? And I have it in me. It was bred into me. I know that I can go there. Unconsciously, I can have racist thoughts. And I have to learn to combat them because I took it in with my mother's milk kind of a thing, so I understand it. But it is uncomfortable, but Iago's weird, like I'm not so sure how racist he is. Like, he knows that other people are, and he manipulates it. An old black ram is tupping your white, you recover with a Barbary horse, and all that stuff. I hate the Moor. And 'tis thought abroad that twixt my sheets he hath done my off. It's like, what's your reason? Like, it's not about race. He claims, maybe he slept with my wife. I think Cassio might have too. I, for mere suspicion in that kind, will do as if for surety. What? You're just going on suspicion. It's like, it's one of the things where people talk about Iago's motivation, and they're like, what's his motivation? Is he just pure Machiavel? That he just, and I struggled with that. It's like, what is motivating this guy?
Well, and we talked about that from that point of view of, here is Genius Boy at the top of his game, giving you different reasons that you say out loud. It's not even just what might Iago be thinking. You are saying your thoughts out loud. Why are you doing this? Well, it's because you were passed over. Well, it's because he slept with your wife. You give a whole bunch of reasons, and I think Genius Boy is deliberately not giving you a singular reason that motivates it all. And we, as students of the play, and probably as actors and directors, I think are always looking for something simpler. And Shakespeare goes out of his way to make it really complex.
But look how subject Iago is to rumor, too. He says, 'tis thought abroad that twixt my sheets he hath done my office. I know not if it be true, but I from mere suspicion in that kind will do it. He's not even saying, like, I suspected. He's like, I heard a rumor, and now I think, I can see that.
But isn't that how racism works, right? Like, when we think
but that's how jealousy works too, I think. Is that
but when we're looking at this play, because one, you can't extract somebody's race from who they are, right? So to say that it's not about race, I think that's a big claim to make, that when you're talking about the old black ram, for instance, if it's not about race, why do we have to see his blackness?
Well, I didn't say it wasn't about race. I said that I thought Iago wasn't necessarily racist, so like that wasn't his main motivator.
I wrote down
he's
about race.
manipulating cultural racism to his advantage. Like, because that's when he shouts out to Brabantio, right? He's saying, I mean, he's really manipulating Brabantio's racism.
Well, but he can only do that if he knows how. You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm saying. He has to be able to have that come from within in order for that to work. And so that's why I think, in terms of seeing what's driving this play, right? This is a society in which Othello fits until he doesn't. What limits his ability to be a full participant in that society is the fact that this is a world dominated by white supremacy. Like, it is. And so I don't think we can say, and I don't want to, certainly I will never say that, you know, it's the jealousy is, you know, what Iago's able to sort of draw out of him. There are moments in this play where Othello's doubts about himself as a black man, I think, are there too. And I think one perhaps might have to be, you know, I don't know if anybody's read Keith Hamilton Cobb's American Moor, for instance, but he strips this play down to an actor who wants to play Othello in a sort of scene with a white director, who is interested in casting a black man in this role. And that white director is talking to the black actor as though he knows what it means to be a black man better than a black man knows what it means to be a black man. And so I think when you look at this play and you think about the racism or even the intimacy between sort of Othello or Iago's desire, right? Like, there's a reason why when lynchings happened, black men's penises were cut off and stuff, because there was a lot of animosity between, or not even between, but coming at black men from white men because of maybe jealousy or whatever you want to think about it, but it is sadistic. And so I just am hesitant to look at this as a play where we have to keep racism in the frame, because if we don't, I think we lose a lot about what's happening in terms of what's even driving that jealousy, for instance, or what's driving the things that are said about Othello, right? Like, stereotypes about black male sexuality and hypersexuality in particular, those are centuries old. And Shakespeare is certainly playing on that in this play. When we think about Othello has a wife, but Iago thinks that he's perhaps been with his wife too. There's so much, I think, to latch on to, both in terms of, so two things we can't extract, right? Race and also gender. Like, those two things are always in the frame in this play.
David, to that end,
The fact that they're
Could
go ahead, Tom.
I just say, I feel like what I said has been altered. I was talking about the character of Iago, not about the play as a whole. So I was talking about Iago's motivations, and I do think racism is present. I do think that Iago has that as part of his of the components. I just feel like he manipulates racism a lot more than he actually necessarily voices his own. That's all I was saying.
Well, and I was also asking stuff from the point of view of being inside the character, what your thoughts are. I think that it is dangerous for any actor to think, I am doing what I am doing. I am inside the character. My character is doing this because I'm a racist. That you can't play racism. You can't play being a racist, in my opinion. That's like, I don't think that most people who are racist think they are racists. And so I'm not sure that is a motivation for an actor inside of a character.
I don't know.
That doesn't mean that it's not in the play, and it doesn't mean that their actions aren't racist, but I'm not sure that racism itself is an action an actor can play.
Well, but you can come from a place of assumed superiority, you know, and you can make choices based on the fact that you're assuming that you're superior.
Which Iago
Yeah,
does across the board, right? Keegs, like, I mean, Iago
Mhm.
thinks he's better than everyone else in the
Yeah,
play.
no, exactly. He's, I
Now,
mean, his arrogance is born of, I think that privilege is part of that, if you want to call it privilege, that imbalance, you know, that is part of it. So
my question for David is kind of right in line with this, Jim. David, I'm just curious, why do you think Shakespeare made the choice to have Othello be a Moor? Because the basic bones of the plot could function with two Italians, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be an Italian of color or more an African coming in, right? So I mean, obviously, it does create more of an outsider sense that we've discussed,
Mhm.
but the idea of one character duping another character into making bad choices based on their emotions happens in a lot of Shakespeare's plays. But in this case, the choice was to specifically have Othello be a Moor. Do you guys have any opinions on why Shakespeare might have made that choice for this story?
Mm. Well, I mean, for this story, because I mean, in terms of thinking about just in general, a general why, you know, when you put this sort of interracial dynamics on the stage in, you know, English Renaissance era, these plays were sensational, right? The sort of outsider is there drawing both, I think, attention, but of course, right, this is an actor who would have been blacked up or used some kind of a white actor who would have been blacked up using blackface or some type of um prosthetic, could be like sort of wrapping fabric around the body to produce the sense of blackness on the stage. But it was, I believe, as far as I know, it was popular. Like these moments were popular, and they caught people's attention because it was sensational. I think when you can also displace issues onto the other, like capital O, that helps also with, I would say, with the sort of gaslighting, if you will, that's happening, because it's like our modern world. Even when we think about, again, how stereotypes and all that work, it's the other that you need to be afraid of. It's not me if we're the same, right? And so I think that is certainly one reason. I think also when we think about Shakespeare being a dramatist who, of course, had to make a living. You know, these plays, I think about Titus Andronicus, for instance, but he wasn't the only playwright. He is the only playwright, as far as we know, who put a black baby on stage, and that happens in Titus Andronicus. Again, this sensational moment in Act 4, Scene 2 of Titus, right? You're getting the I don't know, sort of the shock value of the audience. And there's so much that happens in Othello when we think about what was very important to early modern people, which was, right, endogamy. We want to maintain the purity of bloodlines and all of that. So that is sensational in this play, right? What does Brabantio say? That she has committed treason of the blood. Like she can't, like she couldn't go any further, right? To produce that sort of effect from her father than being with a black man and marrying him, and also defying social codes that in the period, although marriages were not formally arranged, right, there were call them interlocutors or you know, brokers, if you will, but parents and fathers in particular had a big say in sort of the marriage dynamics. And so the fact that Desdemona does this behind her father's back, and there's conduct books that talk about this as well, like you need to be, as the Bible says, sort of equally yoked, right? This is not that. And see what happens when you don't do what you're supposed to do. Like the outcome at the end of this play, not great. And so I think it's also a way of keeping people in line, keeping people doing whatever the sort of right thing is that the dominant culture expects.
That's cool.
Picking up on what you were saying there, David, I think that Aaron the Moor was a breakthrough on the Elizabethan stage.
Mm-hmm.
That there was this sensational use of Moors and Jews,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
but Aaron the Moor became a three-dimensional character, but he also wasn't the main character. After writing that, he writes The Prince of Morocco in The Merchant of Venice later on, which is another, I think, amazing three-dimensional character, even though it's a small character who is very proud of his blackness and speaks to his blackness as being closer to God. And then the hero white woman disses him, and I think that because of his race. And by the time Shakespeare gets to Othello, I don't believe there is, and James is king probably by the time he writes that. I don't think there is any Elizabethan or Jacobean play that is centered around a Moor who is a three-dimensional character who is also a hero on some level, that is then, of course, written in this mold where he takes a big fall. But I think Shakespeare is unique in how he puts, in all three of these cases, Moors on stage in a way that nobody else had before.
And the other thing I would add too is because Shakespeare very much both had an awareness of, but also engaged with the domestic tragedy subgenre. And so to again create a domestic tragedy and have the titular character be a Black Moor, like that's also like, So because most domestic tragedies were centered on, again, thinking about endogamous or intraracial relationships. And so to have this big play with this title character who is a Black man who marries a white woman, because we get the interracial dynamic in Titus Andronicus, but in a kind of different way. It's not completely from start to finish the thing that we're focused on in that play like we are with this one. And so it's something to watch.
Because I know, David, that Titus was your gateway Shakespeare play. James played Titus, Renee played Aaron the Moor, and Sarah played Tamara when I directed. So that's a bizarre thing that all those three are here.
Hey,
Yeah, we're gonna need to have you speak a little bit just so we can make sure you still have your tongue. One character, sorry.
Hey, Jim, amid this discussion, what's it been like for you, especially, in this era, to be a white director directing this play? Well, I mean, when you have conversations with your Othello and that kind of thing, what's the perspective? What are the concerns? What are the anxieties that you've confronted?
David brought up not having taught the play until after 2020. I haven't directed it after 2020. And so I think that the world feels different to me now. And some of that is just as we were talking about with Renee, you get older, you have more life experience, and you come at things differently. But I think that there was just shit that I had never, ever thought about going on in my entire life that I never thought about before 2020. And so I feel like having directed this play 5 times before 2020 as a younger white man, a slightly older than that, and then old white man. I've run the gamut of white years in there. I think that the director in American Moor is an asshole. Is and if I don't know the author personally. What I would love is that I feel like he made in that play it easy to hate white directors who are assholes. And I would have liked to have him. I felt like that was a 2-dimensional white asshole. I wish he would have made a 3-dimensional white asshole, because I thought that he was so fucking stupid in telling a black man what it means to be black. And even in my youngest, stupidest days, I don't think that I ever was that flavor of stupid. I think it's such a brilliant story that has so many facets that my job as the director is to try to bring out everything that's there. And y'all that have been directed by me know this more. Those of you that have seen plays that I've directed, you may have felt what I'm about to say, or maybe not. I'm a huge believer. If I'm going to direct a play, I want the play to be the star, not me, and not my take on the play. I want to have enough arrogance that I believe I can take what is there on the page and present it in a billion different colors and a billion different flavors from a billion different points of view, so that lots of different folks can see themselves in that story, and people who view the world differently than I do, people who are different from me. I think Shakespeare, the brilliance of Shakespeare is that he wrote for so many different kinds of people of different education backgrounds, of different classes, and I believe different races, to be able to see themselves in these plays, because he touches on humanity in a way that was true for his audience back then and is still true for our audience today. And so my job as a director is to try to bring all that great shit out in every way I can with what I bring to the table, and extract from the people that I'm working with in a collaborative way, trying to bring in their points of view, so that lots of different points of view are being represented, without thinking I've got to guide the audience into leaving the theater thinking A, B, and C. And frankly, that's why I became the director that I am, is because as an actor, I fucking hated directors that did that. They took a slice of a play and thought that's what the audience needs to walk away with, and they made everything conform to that funnel. And the greatest thing about Shakespeare is that you can have two people sitting next to each other and argue the hell out of what they just saw because they saw it differently. And so I think there are added elements when you're doing a play that has so much stuff about race in it, and you are a particular race, and I think part of it is trying to be collaborative, to reach beyond my own thoughts and my own experiences. Yes, sir, Renee.
I just would like to insert a little sidebar here and say this is why I worked for you for as long as I did, because I do not like to work with directors who are interested in programming me into their vision of the play, and prefer directors who are interested in collaborating. And I appreciated that you were always a collaborator, so thank you for that.
Renee, out of curiosity, did you tour the show at all, or did you just do it at Blackfriars?
No, I only did it at Blackfriars.
Okay, I am very curious, Jim, what your Othello's... Have you put Othello on tour a lot over the years?
Yes. Renee was in the 2 that I directed that didn't tour. The other 3 that I directed toured.
I'd be very curious to hear from those folks what the regional changes are from performance to performance. I mean, it's interesting just to, because the audience coming to the Blackfriars is coming to the Blackfriars to see that show. And of course, everyone's coming with their own preconceived notions. But when you're going into a school that may be an all black school in the South or an all white school in the South, I'd be very curious to know what that, you guys experience it all the time in life. It's a part of my privilege that I don't think about that a lot. But as an actor going into that environment, I'd just be curious to know what it feels like, and Jim, how you would prep them for that experience.
That's teeing up my next question pretty well, because being on tour with Othello in at the New Mexico Military Institute. And my Othello has dreads, and my Iago has long, greasy hair and a beard, and we're in a military school. So doing a military play with two guys that don't look anything like they would be in a military place is one of the things that comes to my mind. But what also comes to my mind is the play, in my opinion, is so complex about race and about racism in ways that I also think Merchant of Venice is. And there are times touring those shows, and I think Shakespeare's funny, and Shakespeare's again, to just use the terms that we've used and we can argue about, but the most racist manipulator on the damn stage is Iago, and he's written to be charismatic. He's a racist manipulating Mercutio. Shakespeare writes these charismatic figures that he wants, I think, the audience. Macbeth. If you don't believe in Macbeth and think he's the hero, and then he goes this way, that you're like, oh shit, the guy that I fell in love with is got all these issues. You put that in front of kids, and you let the dick jokes be dick jokes. You let the funny stuff be funny. I sometimes was afraid that I was creating a bunch of little, 300 racists are going to leave this production of Othello and Merchant because I just fed them stuff that they are not going to get the complexity. So I think it's dangerous. And I think Shakespeare knew that. And I think that he knew some people in that audience were going to be right there with Iago. We're going to be right there with Macbeth and be thinking, I hope Macbeth wins that final fight and Macduff does not. But that brings us to the place of the way that I phrased it to you, Renee and David, when I sent it to you. I know this next section may seem reductive / simplistic, but many productions, companies, audiences wrestle with these questions, especially in 2025. Blah, 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 blah. We can use this to cover a lot of other grounds, including the anti-racist lens that David applies in his book. Is this a racist play? Is it about racism? Is it both? Some folks think we should no longer stage it. What do you two think? What do you think of those?
Why is Renee always defer to me? Like, I feel like I want you to talk because I'm talking, but sure, okay.
Well, because part of it, I'll tell you, part of it is because, like, part of it isn't my business, right? Like, as an actor, you only have but so much control of what happens in your life. Like, I can talk about how I generate my own career all I want to, but at the end of the day, someone else is making a lot of the decisions in my career. And if I'm in a play not directed by Jim Warren or not in a Renaissance season where we don't have directors at all, largely, my job is to do what I am told. So, like, there are conversations that, so, like, with this play, a lot of my thoughts about this play come from the person who is inside the play, not the person who is outside of the play.
Well, but okay, so from that point of view, do you think it's a racist play? Do you think it's about racism? Do you think it's both? Do you think that we should stop performing it because it is dangerous?
No, to that last one. Do I think that? No, I don't. Although I will also say that I don't think we should do Shrew anymore. So maybe on some level, I could understand an argument for why we don't do Othello anymore. I think in a macro, yes, it is a racist play because it was written in a culture that was racist at a time that, it maybe didn't use these words, but at a time where there was an understanding that was different and othered And so, yes, but I also think it is yes and. It is, yes, it is, and it is not the only thing that it is about. It is about racism, but it is also a love story. It is also about jealousy. It is also about well, love story sort of in all of the various forms that that means is what this play is about for me.
Mm. Okay. So no, short answer, I don't, and even in my class, I don't define this play as a racist play. I don't think we can say that about it. I think it is about racism. And so rhetorically, you're saying two different things when you classify it as a racist play, versus saying what it's about, right? Because if we look at, moments in the play where Shakespeare makes us think about how he might have seen things, whether that's this play or I think Titus is another example where students will say in that play too, like Shakespeare was racist. And I'm like, I don't think we can say that. I mean, where's his diary? Let's go read that and see if like he's got some entries in there that tell us that. But otherwise, it's about racism. And if it's not, same thing with Merchant of Venice, or we could go look at Christopher Marlowe and the Jew of Malta. As much as these playwrights are showing us and displaying racism on the stage, they're also doing things to make us see that not everybody is like that. And if I didn't want to, if I wanted to create something that was strictly sexist or strictly misogynist or strictly racist, that would beg the question. I think Titus is such a great example of that, right? Like, why did Shakespeare create this moment in Act 4, Scene 2 where he turns on its head the idea that the Black character is the most evil, vile person in that play, who becomes this nurturing parental figure that is, I think, a standout in comparison to all the other parents in the play? Like, why do that? If we're going to create a play that is completely racist, we cannot have that moment. And if we're going to put that moment in there, then that to me says that the playwright wants somebody who's paying attention to think about, like, well, what am I being asked to consider here? And what questions is this play asking me? I mean, 12th Night, whether we stick with an interracial play or intra-racial play, all of these plays have moments like that. I think the way that Malvolio is treated in 12th Night is awful, but Shakespeare is asking us to think about stuff, right? Like sportful malice is a term that's used in that play, and people talk in our world about, it was just a racist joke, or it was just a sexist joke. Well, that's an oxymoron. Like, is that such a thing? Like, if you've got to put a tinge of that other thing in there, you're trying to do something with that doesn't quite work. And so I think that sportful malice is the same thing as like a white lie versus a lie. It's still a lie, right? So that's my thoughts on that.
Well, I because it's my fault I brought up Merchant, but and you brought up Marlowe. James Keegan, you played the title role in The Jew of Malta.
Oh,
and
wow.
you played Shylock in Shakespeare's play. How would you characterize those two lead Jewish characters by Elizabethan playwrights?
I understand the arguments that I've had Jewish friends who really reject both of those plays, and I get it. I understand it, but I'm sort of with Renee, like I'm cast, and there it is. So it's my job to find. I'm not playing it in a red nose and a red wig. As it was on the Elizabethan stage played, so you did have this pastiche of what it meant to be a Jew. Shylock is so interesting because the text isolates him. It's not just the society, but playing him was so interesting. I was so isolated from the rest of the cast. I found myself backstage alone all the time. It was fascinating. And and then we did the real kind of spitting on thing, and on stage, and it's just such a completely dehumanizing thing. I think it interrogates that kind of treatment of people and relegating of people to a category, much more deeply. Barabbas is I know he has that speech about what Jews do, kind of a thing, but he clearly, well, at least when I was delivering it, I mean, he was taking the stereotype and investing in it in a vicious way to say, this is what you want to make of me? Okay, I'm going to bring it. You know, like you never imagined I could bring it, you know, and I'll perform what you want me to be since you've put me in this position, and I'll defeat you with it. So I think it's that kind of hubris, you know, that really, to me, that's just deeply human. You know? I mean,
it's kind of a sidebar next to a bunch of the Othello stuff that we're talking about, but I think it's a great example of Marlowe's genius in creating that character in that play. In my opinion, he was elevating the comic villain stereotype to a new level, putting him front and center and making him the star of the show. But in my opinion, he was still not quite as three-dimensional as what Shakespeare did with Shylock. I feel
agree.
like Shakespeare took that thing and then wanted to create a bigger heart and in my opinion, a more three-dimensional character. And that to me is what he did with his Moore characters as well. And he took it to a new level. And I always compared Shakespeare to the damn Beatles. And the Beatles didn't invent rock and roll, and they didn't invent taking American blues and turning it into, but they turned it on its ear and made it a different kind of art form. They elevated it. And to me, that's true about Shakespeare's in with Othello and with Merchant.
Yeah, one of the other things, though, you know, it's like Shakespeare wasn't writing Shylock for potentially a Jewish actor to play, or Othello for a black actor to play, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember listening to Rene, you know, wash himself down in gulfs of liquid fire night after night out on stage. And I was so jealous that he got to do that speech. As an actor, I'm just like, you know, I just want to do that speech. And I'm like, there's no more white Othellos, buddy. You're not going to get to do it. The last white Othello I saw was Patrick Stewart, and it was the 1990s, and he was in a negative production in DC, you know. You know, but that's just actor ego and jealousy, kind of a thing, you know, wanting to do everything. That's my inner bottom. But it's so interesting that, you know, like now we have kind of that you know, like that we have to deal with. I mean, I really think, like, you know, I mean, I just did a production a few years ago of Passover, you know, and we had a black actor, and there's two main black characters, and I was playing the white racist characters in that. It was so interesting to be in the rehearsal room and just shut the hell up, especially for me, you know, because I don't shut the hell up, as we know. So it was just like, I wonder, like, you know, I wonder, Jim, what it would feel like for you now if you tried to direct Othello right now, you know?
Well, Americans doing Othello, directing or acting or producing it in America after the Civil War, after the Civil Rights Movement, after 2020, there are different things that happen at different times that make us view things differently. Doing Merchant of Venice after the Holocaust means something completely different when it was written hundreds of years before that. And so that's part of what David was saying earlier about how is it about today? How is exploring the play going to illuminate something about our world here and now? And for my taste, as an audience member and as a director, how do we find that inside of the story as it's written, rather than stamping a directorial auteur vision to it that is limiting? I believe this stuff is so good and it's so worth doing that it will relate to every age slightly differently. And I feel like I would direct Othello differently today because of where our world is today. But I also would not be afraid of directing it. Camille, what would you like to say?
Hey there. So, 20 years ago, I worked for ASC in the education department, and one of my tasks was to co-write study guides. And I have dug up the 2006 version
Wow.
of Othello. And Renee, I have a quote from you dated
God.
9/14, 2006.
Now, Renee, before you hear it, you can always say I was misquoted.
Yes. And so in part, you say clearly this country's relationship to race is different then than now, which also affects how this play is received. As a classical actor in the 21st century, I'm not solely restricted to playing Othello and Aaron the Moor. You touched on that second part earlier tonight. And in light of what Jim just said about a post-2020 production, if you could put yourself in a position of an actor's Renaissance season, what would be top of mind that first day in rehearsal if you were in spring 2026 back at ASC and as Othello?
I will take the quote, by the way. I will still stand by the quote.
I think you sound pretty smart.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. It's kind of what I said before. Like, I don't know that my feelings about the play have not changed, really. And, you know, what is also true is that I think the world changed for a lot of people in 2020 unless you were already Black. Like, the world didn't change that much for me. Like, those circumstances of my life were the same after 2020 as they were before 2020. So I don't, what is different for me is how we make plays. The theater world is different now than it was pre-quarantine. And there's a lot more attention placed on taking care of everyone in the room. And so that would be my focus on the first day of rehearsal, is to make sure that everyone in the room was ready for a process where they were going to feel heard and taken care of and supported in ways that they needed to be.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That's a good look at that.
Oh my God,
look
at
guys.
us, babies. Wow. That's
Does
20 years
anybody
ago.
else
That's
have
crazy that it
questions?
was 20 years ago. Lord. Okay, sorry.
And I still didn't have hair.
Other questions from y'all?
Anything from Desdemona?
Yeah, hi, Sarah.
That's where I was going.
Oh, hello.
Oh no.
Oh no. So obviously this conversation has not gone in the direction of speaking about the women in this play, but I do think that they play a very pivotal role in what's going on with the men and how things are being reacted. And I do think, David, you touched on this a little bit, but Desdemona is strong and bold and really stepping outside of the comfort zones and what was accepted at the time for a woman in her place. And that speech to her father in Act 1, Scene 3 is, I think it's so simply beautiful and elegant, but she's throwing things back in his face a little bit as well, and saying, you know, you brought this man into our home. He sat and charmed me with these stories. The reason that I'm in love with him is kind of because of the exposure that you granted me. And that division that she's talking about, I think loyalty is such another huge running theme in this play. Of course, this play is about racism, and of course, it's about manipulation and mindfuck, but it is. And loyalty is tied into all of that, right? It's trustworthiness and it's loyalty. And the women in this play, what that means to Amelia and what that means to Desdemona, what Amelia's willing to do for her husband, for whatever her reasons are. And I think the fact that Desdemona makes the choice that she does to be with Othello against all odds, against what society is telling her to do, against what she knows her father will not accept, is really bold and beautiful. And the tragedy of what happens to Othello, and hence then Desdemona, because of what happens, is it's a beautiful play, and it's very important to the rest of the story. That part of it, the complexity of the women in this story, is there as well.
Yes.
I know that would be a whole other podcast. I understand that, but
Not at all.
I don't think the ladies got enough mention tonight. And I want to say
fair.
that I think they're crucial. I think that what's going on there is also very crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that I started a company called the American Shakespeare Center, you know, because of Shakespeare and because who I think Shakespeare is. And I know I'm a damn homer. But I would challenge everyone that knows stuff about the other plays that were written at this time. It's not just that he brought humanity to more characters, that he brought humanity to Jewish characters in ways that hadn't been done. He brings power and authority and heart and soul and intelligence to women that is
Correct.
Unlike any other playwright of the time. And there were some great plays written that have strong female characters, and they still are nowhere close to what Shakespeare does. Even in a play that's dominated by men like Julius Caesar, those women are smart and strong. And a lot of folks in trying to talk about Desdemona, they will often talk about productions that seem to be modernizing her to make her not a wallflower, to not, you know, as a daughter of the patriarchy, as a daughter of the white patriarchy, that somehow she's supposed to be something that ain't the woman on that page.
Agreed. And she, you know, at the end of that first scene, after she's speaking to her father, you know, she let me go with him. She's making a choice. She's of course asking for permission, but she is asserting her dominance in what she wants to do because she has made the decision to be with this man now. And yes, I was beholden to you, Father, before this, but now this is my husband and I choose this. I want to go with him. I want to do that.
She may be naive in this, but in that boldness, she's also breaking military protocol.
Oh, 100%.
Send me to the war with my husband, because if you're going to send him, then you're going to send me. Oh, my God.
I played another lady who kind of breaks military rules. Her name's Cleopatra
Yes,
in later life.
yes, good indeed. I always thought that you know, having played Brabantio against you in that scene too, I always thought it was interesting in light of what we're talking about, in the way that she calls out Brabantio's performed equanimity. You know what I mean? That he brings Othello into the house and he's like, everybody's welcome. Meet this guy. Listen to his stories. For God's sake, don't marry him. You know, but it's like he never says that, you know, but he and then she says, I listened to him as a guest in our house. And Othello even says it. She loved me for the dangers that I passed, you know? I mean, she loved the person. It's nothing to do with any kind of superficial judgments, even though she refers to him as the Moor, because he's sort of known by that. But I always thought, like, at Brabantio, you know, that generation really gets called out for performing something that it wasn't willing to back, you know?
Well, and we're back to what David was talking about. hero worship these NFL players, hero worship them until they take a knee during the national anthem, and then fuck you. You know, like this guy, listen to this guy.
Don't
You wanna
marry him.
Marry this guy? I had never even considered that as a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Sarah, thank you for bringing Desdemona into the conversation, and Amelia as well, because for me, Desdemona is Othello's whole world. That, to me, is what this play is. Like, that is the centerpiece for me of this play. A couple of years ago, I had a director that I know reach out. He was directing a production of Othello a couple of years ago. It was actually pre-2020. And I say a couple of years ago, and I mean like 10, really. But
Yes. Welcome to the world of old, Renee.
yeah.
Welcome.
He was like, he asked if I would talk to the actor playing the role, because the actor was struggling, and what I said to him was, he was like, I just don't know like how to come at this role. And I was like, at the end of the day, I think your job, if you are playing Othello, is to make Desdemona your world. It's to fall in love with that woman, to make every choice that you make in this play about her. That is how this play happens. For me, as an actor, it is how I think the play makes sense. I think if we don't feel like that relationship is extraordinary, then there's no play to happen after it. Nothing else matters.
Where's the tragedy if they don't truly love each other? And
Exactly.
how is Iago able to get into Othello's brain on those deep levels if those feelings aren't there and deep and real?
And he says at the end, and that's always been a key thing for me that Othello says in this play, is he says, think of me as one that loved not wisely, but too well, of one not easily jealous, but being wrought, perplexed in the extreme. Like, that, to me, those two lines are the like centerpiece of my Othello and how I feel about this play.
If you don't love her truly, madly, deeply, then the betrayal doesn't matter.
Very much.
The betrayal that you think has happened, that actually did not happen.
He never just
Yes.
asks. He never just says,
I know,
did
right?
you do it? He never just asks her.
Yeah. I mean, because it's about listening too, right? It's about, and it's one of the things I think many reasons that I think this play is so extraordinary is because I do think that jealousy is something that is universal and that everyone can understand. And I don't think there is an adult human on the planet who hasn't been jealous of someone for something. It doesn't have to be relationship. It could be professional. It can, there's a bunch of ways in which that can occur. But I think that we can all understand what it is like to feel like something that is yours is being taken away from you. And, in talkback after talkback after talkback, this comes up with Winter's Tale as well. It's that like people want you to give logical answers to a thing that in and of itself is not logical.
Completely irrational.
Yeah.
And even if you're not a jealous type, yes, you felt something like that in your life. But even let's say you're not the jealous type, you've been on the receiving end of it, and you know what it's like to have someone who is jealous having that huge effect on you, and you having to try to explain yourself to someone who's completely irrational, with there's no logic, there's no, oh, here's the proof that you did this. It's just that feeling that is overwhelming and takes over for some people. And we can all relate to that on one side or the other, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Renee, that's so interesting because it is a crime of passion at the end of the day. And we talked about this once before, Jim, that the progression of events at the end of this play, considering the level of emotion you have to be in, are kind of drawn out, right? I mean, it's not Hamlet where all the action piles on top of each other and everybody's dead. Like, you have to be in that space for a long time. What was that like?
It's funny you mentioned that, because as I got into reading Act 4, I was like, Jesus, every scene he's coming out here and like he is still in this space. damn, that's exhausting. It was exhausting reading it. But also, I mean, that, like, listen, I'm an actor who likes some drama on the stage. So,
That's where to keep the drama. Keep it on the stage.
Go eat that dinner.
and so, like, that's awesome. Like, yes, it's exhausting, but also it's exhilarating. Like, as an actor, like that's one of the reasons why I do Shakespeare, because that's all the good juicy stuff that you get to play, not this boring everyday nonsense you get in some of these contemporary plays. Who has time for that?
Well, and you ask for proof, and you keep wanting the next step of proof,
Yeah.
which is part of, I think, what Hamlet does too. That and it could turn just like that. All you have to do is talk to her in a different way than you end up talking to her, because it's a fait accompli at that point.
Right. Yeah. There was a line. What was that line that I wrote down? That was I didn't even write down who says it, but it's someone in this play. Says, "Being done, there is no pause." And that really struck me of like, it is true that if Othello and Desdemona sat down and had an adult, rational conversation, and maybe invite Cassio over, we have some soup, we like sit down and have a little chit chat about what's going on, we could clear this all right up. But it's done. It's already done. Iago is so good at seducing Othello that at that point, I mean, I don't even know even if Iago never showed up with that handkerchief. I mean, the handkerchief obviously is the like final nail in the coffin, but there are already a lot of nails in that coffin before that handkerchief shows up. Like Iago has already pushed Othello so close to the edge of the cliff that the mere weight of the handkerchief sends him off the edge of it. But he was already right there, ready to fall.
We should wrap up. I am wondering, David, if there is anything that if this is the last moment on earth that somebody has to listen to Dr. David Sterling Brown, is there something about this play that you haven't gotten the chance to say that you would like to have out there on this person's last evening?
No pressure.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this is that thing, because you made that pretty lofty. But something that came to mind, I think it was when James was talking, and I think he used the word charismatic when he was talking about Iago.
I know I did. I did.
Yeah. So charismatic, and also thinking about, that he's not, I mean, he's called good Iago several times in the play, even though he's not good. It made me, whenever that was mentioned, that was minutes ago, but it made me think of our current president. Like, so many people are enamored with him. So many people follow Donald Trump. So many people think, despite every bad thing he's done that they have seen since like 2015 or whatever, that he's still good. And I think there is something in that when we think about bad people being likable. And so I think there's something to be said about Iago and why people maybe gravitate toward that character, or even if they don't necessarily identify with Iago, literally like a desire to, because, to be bad in some sense sometimes looks good, but there are consequences for that. And I think that is what this play teaches us, right? At the end, there's consequences for that unruly, uncontrollable badness. And I think we are also seeing that in our contemporary moment right now.
I think that's a really great point. And I think that part of what limits a lot of productions of this play is that they don't allow Iago to be great at being two-faced. That if he's just a mustache twirling villain, then everybody who calls him good is a fucking idiot. And it's far, and part of the reason that I loved casting you in the role, James, is that on stage you are one likable dude. and being older than your Othello
I'm
made
glad you
you.
prefaced that with on stage.
Oh yes, oh yes. I was carefully choosing my words. Those folks who don't know you, James, think you are a swell guy, and I think that's so important because he's going to directly tell the audience that he is not what he seems, and I am not what I am. But he's got to be able to present in a way that people will buy it.
I have often talked about a major production of the show that I saw many years ago. The people involved will remain unnamed. But the Iago had a scar on his face and a leather jacket and a buzz cut and just everything about his look screamed, I am the villain of this play. And it was
Don't trust me.
Infuriating to watch. Because then everyone, as you just said, everyone has to be so dumb. And it makes Othello the stupidest person on the planet. If Iago is presenting as capital V villain, that production made me so angry. Because why would you do that to these people who deserve more? Yeah.
And part of it is look at popular movies, look at popular books, popular TV shows that go the two-dimensional route. That it is much more satisfying, but much harder to try and make things more well-rounded so that you're not telegraphing the shit. But it's harder. It's harder.
Yeah.
Renee, if
Yes.
this is the people's last time on earth to hear you, is there anything that you haven't said about this play?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I haven't gotten to talk about tonight is the other reason why I love this play so much. And David just brushed up on it briefly about this sort of what you called the domesticity. There's a claustrophobic nature to this play that I think separates it from all of the other plays that Shakespeare wrote. There is a whole war that happens that has ended by Act 1. By the end of Act 1, the war is over, and then we still got 4 more acts of play left to go.
No more drama. War is done.
This play tightens around you in a way that you can't get out of it. It makes the audience complicit in Iago's actions by the way Iago talks directly to them. The cast really, after the brawl with Cassio and Montano, the actors on stage shrinks down to about 5 people for the next 2 acts of this play. It just the simmer and the boil, and I think that's deliberate, obviously, because it gives us insight into what's happening in Othello's world and what's happening in Desdemona's world and how Iago is pulling everyone's strings and making the audience complicit in the choices that he's making because they don't stop him. And I love that about this play. I love how there's no room to breathe. There's no, even the comic relief is very brief. Shakespeare loves his clowns. And in this play, we get that one sad clown scene that mostly gets cut in productions of this play. But
not when Jim Warren directs it.
Not when Jim Warren directs it, that's right. Because you need it.
But Rodrigo is often funny throughout. And in my opinion, should be 3-dimensionally funny rather than just a boob.
Yeah, 100%. So I love that about this play, and I think that is, for me, one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite Shakespeare plays, is because it ties us, it locks us in a box, and it doesn't let us out until it's too late. And
like that Iago line, out of her own goodness, make the net that shall enmesh them all. That's what I thought of when you did that. Just this net that enmeshes you.
Yeah.
My
I remember that
member
feeling of
husband has
breathlessness.
one small thing to say, please.
Mac Daddy, hold forth.
This
Look at him,
is
he's so damn handsome. Look at him.
As a man with such a capacity to offend, talking about Othello was I could have done so much damage. So I've decided to keep all of those thoughts to myself and just pass on this one anecdote. In the 2010 version of Othello at the ASC, where Renee was murdering my wife to be, Sarah's parents.
That's a great preface.
Why I hate the play. It's very hard to respect and love a man so much and respect and love your future wife, and to see them kill each other so effectively and so believably. I can never watch the play again. But Sarah's parents had come to see the play, and I was intent on proposing to my wife. And I was trying to do it the traditional way and get my to-be father-in-law by himself so I could ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. The only opportunity I got to do this was in intermission of Othello in the men's toilets with our old men pointing at the porcelain. I had to turn to my father-in-law and say, Steve, I would like to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. So Othello has a particularly special place in my heart, and I just wanted to share that all with you. He said yes.
Now, when you said you turned at that moment,
Well, it was sort of a,
I love that.
Good.
it was very practiced.
gotcha. I
Well,
will never
now all
shake
of
that
us.
now.
And now, yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. We can all take that one with us. And if we die tonight, then we will die with that one on our hearts.
You're
Thank you all so
welcome.
much for being here. Thank you so
Thank you for
much.
having us.
You.
Great conversation.
Pleasure to see you all.
Yes, absolutely.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.